Today's video is brought to you by Rocketman and Rocketman Rewards. Keep watching or check out the link in the video description to learn more. Welcome back to RM Transit. The first thing I do anytime I walk into the subway is take a look up at the next train arrival screen to see when the next train is coming. But this is an honestly terrible experience here in Toronto, where we use our next train screen mostly for ads. Because who actually cares about the people using the subway? But it need not be this way. Around the world, different cities have different approaches to this problem. You'd think that this should be a pretty simple piece of wayfinding, but there are a lot of different ways of attacking it. So let's take a look around the world and try to figure out what the best solution might be. If you're not already, consider supporting the channel via Patreon as well as YouTube memberships. It really helps me make more content and better content for all of you. The first thing I decided to do in my quest to find the perfect next train screen is to look at everything that makes Toronto's next train screens kind of bad. For one, you have a tiny space to show the time until the next train comes, as well as the actual time, which is important if you're trying to get anywhere on time. The numbers do have good contrast with the screen itself, but they're so small that they're really difficult to see. That's especially true if you're some distance down the platform. At the same time, the TV-like profile of the screens means that they can hang pretty low, which isn't great, especially in older stations where the ceilings are already low and you want to keep your head. Now, looking at other cities internationally, I really like the example of Paris. Vancouver's Canada line really runs with this and uses a similar LED dot matrix screen, but this screen is far more flexible since it isn't just a sign with cutouts for the numbers until the next trains arrive. This allows the display to show flexible things like stations where the elevators aren't working or service disruptions. It also provides the next 3 departures, and since trains on the Canada line could potentially be going to different locations, it shows the actual location the train is traveling to, which actually can be useful in pretty much any system for when you're doing things like a short turn. It seems like a very similar next train screen system will be used on the Eglinton Crosstown, at least on the surface section, which is decent because this is a bright and fairly legible approach. Now, Montreal also takes a similar approach to Paris in showing the next 2 trains rather than Toronto's next 1 train. Montreal also does do some of the same stuff as Toronto, like showing way too many ads, which isn't great. But something unique Montreal has done, like quite unique, is to display the next train screens as projections, often in the large cavernous stations, which is actually a really cool approach and means that it's at least easy to see when the next train is coming most of the time. Now, we've seen some solutions, but before we address a few more, a quick message from our sponsor.
When you're passionate about transit like me, which if you're watching this channel you probably are, you probably love the convenience and flexibility riding transit gives us. Whether that means being able to catch a frequent bus, passing right outside your front door, or sitting down in a comfy train and getting some work done along the way. But more often than not, you might find yourself commuting from point A to B and getting a little bit bored. The perils of underground transit without cell reception, or just waiting for a train with not much in terms of entertainment. Fret not, this is where today's sponsor Rocketman comes in. The Rocketman team is always dreaming up new and inventive ways to make traveling on transit more exciting, and now they found a solution for transit doldrums in the form of cold, hard cash back. Introducing Rocketman Rewards, the casual way to earn money while taking transit by answering real-time polls with thrilling questions like whether pineapple truly belongs on pizza, it doesn't, or if dogs make better pets than cats. Think of it as an anonymous way to speak your mind while earning money in the process. Check out Rocketman using the link in the description below and start earning cash back on your commute.
Now, getting back to Vancouver, I think with the latest next train screens in the city, which I have to say Vancouver has done a great job of actually prioritizing basic digital wayfinding. Good job, Vancouver. Vancouver has done a really good job, though, with its new passenger information displays, or PIDs. So on each SkyTrain platform where the PIDs are installed, there are 2 screens similar to Toronto's TV screen with small corner numbers. But Vancouver approaches this in a much better way. Not only are there 2 screens per platform, which makes them much more visible because they tend to be closer, but there's also a 3rd screen that is more in the wide format that you see on the Canada line. Except on the Expo line and in the places where the new PIDs have been installed, this is a full color, really bright LED display. And it looks fantastic. Not only does it show the next several trains and have nice animations, but it's also flexible, so you could do lots of different stuff with it in the future. Now, another thing that's really useful that some cities do with their next train arrival screens is actually showing how long the next train is going to be. Now, this might seem sort of unimportant, and it's definitely not that important if you live in a city with relatively small trains like Vancouver, for example. But in a place like perhaps Paris on the RER or on BART in the Bay Area, this can be incredibly important because your trains can potentially be super long, and if a short train comes into the platform, you might not have enough time to actually walk from where you're standing, if you're standing in a certain area of the platform, to the train before it leaves the station. Now, generally the approach to this is showing this information numerically, but if there is a way to show it as a diagram, that's even better. You actually have screens right next to the door. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff, like say whether the next train is actually going to open at this door, maybe it's too short, or maybe the door isn't even working on that train. That is super useful and makes the experience just more seamless. Now, another useful feature that can be incorporated, especially in the COVID and post-COVID eras, is how congested the cars are. Not only does this help with people's anxiety about congestion, but it also can help spread the load among a train to help you more efficiently use your capacity. Actually work by using the same sensors that adjust the suspension in rail cars to keep them level with the platform to judge how heavy the car is and thus how many people are probably in it. Now, as a rider, what I think ultimately that next train arrival screens should try to do is show me information that's relevant to me as a rider. One of the things that really frustrates me about what Toronto does is appropriating the next train screens, which are essentially wayfinding for ads. I'm totally cool with having ad posters and stuff in stations. I actually think it can be sometimes pretty interesting to see what the new ad is in the city, and I always enjoy looking at the ads in things like the London Underground and the New York subway. But wayfinding and advertising should really be kept distinct. At the end of the day, wayfinding devices like next train screens should provide information that's relevant to me as a rider. So if I'm walking into the station, something Vancouver does that I think is a really good approach is actually provides me the information of how long until the next train in each direction is going to be. So I can decide if I should just walk slowly because the train is there and it's going to leave shortly, or if I should run for it because the next train is a minute or two away. I also think it's really important to take a macro level view of things. Ads might seem great because, yay, we can sign a contract and make a few $1 million over a couple of years to put ads on our screens. But I actually think that the better user experience of having better wayfinding probably more than makes up for that in things like ticket revenue. Because at the end of the day, if the train is already running, you should try to get as many people as possible onto it. One very valuable piece of information that you rarely see on these next train arrival screens, at least in Toronto, is literally just the current weather. Now you might wonder why that's particularly relevant, but for example, sometimes people are coming out of an office after a day of work or from a mall directly into a subway station, and it can be really helpful to let them know if they should put their jacket on or get an umbrella out before they depart the train or bus or streetcar, especially if perhaps it's like late at night or something and you can't easily see. Now, I worked together with August from Twitter to design some screens that could potentially be used in Toronto or in San Francisco or other cities. This design provides a lot of information. The next several departures, nice clear text and information on the line and service being provided, as well as cycling information which shows the congestion on trains as well as how long the trains actually are. The fundamental issue here is that something like the user interface for an app that millions of people will use, like Instagram, gets hundreds and hundreds of hours of time and effort put into it. But the amount of time spent on wayfinding for transit systems, which will also get millions and millions of users, is rarely so substantial. And when you look at an app like Instagram or anything else on your phone, the rate at which the user interface evolves and changes is really high, whereas that's not necessarily true in transit. Not that it should be, but constantly developing and improving wayfinding is an important part of actually having a good experience for people on transit. And honestly, I think that people are becoming more and more attuned to the idea of things evolving quickly with modern technology. Context is everything, of course. Information about the particular train you're getting on is less important on a metro system where the trains are all the same, but could be super important on a mainline rail system where trains are of different lengths, different service types, local or express, or even stopping at different stations. Most metro systems wouldn't need this, but in, for example, Tokyo, it might actually make a lot of sense with the various different service patterns you see in that city. Now, nice screens are nice, and if you're in a city that can afford to maintain them, like, I don't know, Hong Kong, where there's a lot of ridership and not that many stations, they can be great. But I have come to appreciate how LED dot screens can be nice in the fact that they are fairly reliable, and so if you're in a city where reliability is an issue, they could be a better option. Especially when you consider that when an LCD screen fails, it usually completely fails, whereas an LED dot matrix screen, sometimes just a single LED will die or something like that. Ultimately, excessive frills are not a good thing for transit. But we should consider that sometimes the reason transit isn't popular is because it doesn't excite people or give them a good user experience. And if it can, maybe it should. Thanks for watching.